I got into the Illuminati in 1951, when Joe McCarthy was riding high and everybody was looking for conspiracies everywhere. In my own naive way, I was a sophomore at New York University at the time, I was seeking to find myself. I answered one of those Rosicrucian ads in the back of a girly magazine. Of course, the Rosicrucians aren't a front in the simple way that the Birchers and other paranoids think. Only a couple of plants at Amorc headquarters are Illuminati agents. But they select possible candidates at random, and we get slightly different mailings than those sent to the average new member. If we show the proper spirit, our mailings get more interesting and a personal contact is made. Well, pretty soon I swore the whole oath, including that silly part about never visiting Naples, which is just an expression of an old grudge of Weishaupt's, and I was admitted as Illuminatus Minerval, with the name Ringo Erigena. Since I was majoring in law, I was instructed to seek a career in the FBI. I met Eisenhower only once, at a very large and sumptuous ball. He called another agent and myself aside. "Keep your eye on Mamie," he said. "If she has 5 martinis or starts quoting John Wayne, get her upstairs quick." Kennedy, I never even talked to, but Winifred, whose name in the order is Scotus Pythagoras, used to bitch about him a lot.
"This new frontier stuff is dangerous,"
Winifred would say testily.
"The man thinks he's living in a Western movie. One big showdown and the bad guys bite the dust. We'd best not let him last too long."
You can imagine how upset I was when the Dallas caper began to throw light on the whole overall pattern. Of course, I didn't know what to do. Winifred was my only superior in the government, who was also a superior in the Illuminati. But I had a lot of hunches and guesses about some others. I wouldn't want to bet that John Edgar wasn't one of them, for instance. When the feeler came from the CIA, I went on what these kids today call a paranoid trip. It could have been coincidence or synchronicity, but it could have been the order, scanning me and ensuring that my involvement would get deeper.
"Most people in espionage don't know who they're working for,"
Winifred told me once in that voice of silk and satin and stilettos.
"Especially the ones who only do small jobs. Suppose we find a French-Canadian separatist in Montreal, who's in a position to provide certain information at certain times. We certainly don't ask him to work for American intelligence. That's no concern of his, and even inimical to his real interests. So, he's approached by another very convincing French-Canadian who has evidence to prove he's an agent of the most secret of all Quebec Libre underground movements. Or, if the Russians find a woman in Nairobi who has access to certain offices and happens to be anti-communist and pro-English, no sense in trying to recruit her for the MVD, right? The contact she meets has a full set of credentials and just the right Oxford tone to convince her he's with M5 in London. And so it goes,"
he ended dreamily.
"So it goes."
My CIA contact really was CIA. I'm almost absolutely willing to give odds around 60-40 on that. At least he knew the proper passwords to show that he was acting under presidential orders, whatever that proves. It was Hoover himself who ordered me to infiltrate God's Lightning. Well, he didn't pick me alone. I was part of a group, and a rousing pep talk he gave us. I can still remember him saying,
"Don't let their American flags fool you. Look at those lightning bolts right out of Nazi Germany. And remember, the next thing to a godless commie is a godless Nazi. They're both against free enterprise."
Of course, as soon as I was admitted to the Arlington chapter of God's Lightning, I found out that free enterprise stood second only to Heraclitus in their pantheon. J. Edgar did get some queer hornets in his headgear at times. Like his fear that John Dillinger was really still alive someplace, laughing at him. That was the dread that turned him against Melvin Purvis, the agent who gunned Dillinger down in Chicago, and he rode Purvis right out of the bureau. Those of you with long memories will recall that poor Purvis ended up working for a breakfast cereal company, acting as titular head of the Post-Toasties Junior G-Men. It was in God's Lightning that I read Telemachus Sneezed, which I still think is a rip-roaring good yarn. That scene where Taffy Rhinestone sees the new king on television, and it's her old rapist friend with the gaunt cheeks, and he says, "My name is John Gilt." Man, that's writing. His 103-page-long speech afterwards, explaining the importance of guilt and showing why all the anti-Heraclitans and Freudians and relativists are destroying civilization by destroying guilt, certainly is persuasive. Especially to somebody like me with 3 going on 4 personalities, each of which is betraying the others. I still quote his last line, "Without guilt, there can be no civilization." Her non-fiction book, Militarism, the Unknown Ideal for the New Heraclitan, is, I think, a distinct letdown. But the God's Lightning bumper stickers asking, "What is John Guilt?" sure give people the creeps until they learn the answer. I met Atlanta Hope herself at the time of the New York draft riots. That was, you will remember, when God's Lightning, disgusted with reports that the FBI was swamped in 2 years' backlog in draft resistance and draft evasion cases, decided to organize vigilante groups to hunt down the hippie-yippie, commie pacifist scum themselves. As soon as they entered the East Village, which harbored, as they suspected, hundreds of thousands of bearded, long-haired, and otherwise semi-visible fugitives from the Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Taiwan, Costa Rica, Chile, and Tierra del Fuego conflicts, they began to encounter both suspects and resistance. After the 3rd hour, the mayor ordered the police to cordon the area. The police, of course, were on the side of God's Lightning and did all they could to aid their mayhem against the great unwashed, while preventing reciprocal mayhem. After the 3rd day, the governor called out the National Guard. The Guard, who were mostly draft dodgers at heart themselves, tried to even the score and even help the dregs and drugs a bit. After the 3rd week, the president declared that part of Manhattan a disaster area and sent in the Red Cross to help the survivors. I was in the thick and din of it. You have no idea how bizarre civil war gets when one side uses trash cans as a large part of their arsenal. And even met Joe Malik prematurely, under a Silver Wraith Rolls-Royce, where he had crawled to take notes near the front line, and I had crept to nurse wounds received while being pushed through the window of the Peace-Eye bookstore. I have scars I can show you still. And a voice over my shoulder says that I should put in the fact that August Personage was trapped in a phone booth only a few feet away, suffering hideous paranoid delusions that in spite of all this chaos, the police would trace his last obscene call and find him still in the booth, afraid to come out, and face the trash can covers and bullets and other miscellaneous metals in the air. And I even remember that the rolls had a license plate, RPD-1, which suggests that a certain person of importance was also in that odd vicinity, on some doubtless even odder errand. I met Atlanta herself a day later in a block north, on the scene where Taylor Meade was making his famous last stand. Atlanta grabbed my right arm, the wounded one, it made me wince, and howled something like, "Welcome, brother, in the true faith! War is the health of the state. Conflict is the creator of all things." Seeing she was on a heavy Heraclitus wavelength, I quoted, with great passion, "Men should fight for the laws as they would for the walls of the city." That won her, and I was Atlanta's personal lieutenant for the rest of the battle. Atlanta remembered me from the riots, and I was summoned to organize the first tactical strikes against Nader's raiders. If I do say so myself, I did a commendable job. It earned me a raise from the Bureau, a tight but genuinely pleased smile from my CIA drop, a promotion to Illuminatus Prelator from Winifred, and another audience with Atlanta Hope, which led to my initiation into the AA, the super-secret conspiracy for which she was really working. The AA is so arcane that even now I can't reveal the full name hinted in those initials. My secret name was Prince of Wands E. I got the Prince of Wands by picking a tarot card at random, and she gave me the E herself, from which I deduced that there were 4 other Princes of Wands, together with 5 Kings of Swords, and so forth, meaning that the AA was something special in even esoteric realms, since it was a worldwide conspiracy with no more than 390 members. 5 times the number of cards in the tarot deck. The name fairly suited me. I wouldn't want to be Hanged Man D or Fool A, and I was happy that the prince is known for his multiple personalities. If I had been 3.5 agents before, my role in God's Lightning a fairly straightforward one, at least from GL's point of view, since I was only asked to smash, not to spy, there was no doubt that I was 4 agents now, belonging to the FBI, the CIA, the Illuminati, and the AA, and betraying each of them to at least 1 and sometimes 2 or 3 of the others. Yes, I had been converted to the AA during their initiation, If I could describe that most amazing ritual, you would not wonder why. Then came the vice president's brainstorm about economizing on agents, and I began to get transferred on loan to the CIA frequently, whereupon the Bureau discreetly asked me to report anything interesting that I observed. This, however, I perceive as a further complexification of my four-way psychic stretch, and not as the inevitable, irrefragable, and synergetic fifth step. And I was right, for it was only in the last year that I entered the terminal stage, or groomment, as the order calls it, due to those curious events which led me from Robert Putney Drake to Hagbard Chilene. Conspiracy was its own reward to me now. I didn't care what I was conspiring for art's sake. Not whether you betray or preserve, but how you play the game. I sometimes even identified it with the AA notion of the great work, for in the twisting labyrinths of my selves, I was beginning to find the rough sketch for a soul.